Hey guys, in today's video, I bring you a simply breathtaking story. Let's learn the story of Dr. Everett Langston, a renowned heart surgeon who always denied the existence of God until he suffered a massive heart attack and was dead for 17 minutes. What he saw on the other side challenges everything we believe about science, consciousness, and spirituality. He found Jesus in a way that had never been revealed before and came back with an impactful message for humanity. What he witnessed will give you goosebumps. So, before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Now, get ready for this transformative experience. My name is Dr. Everett Langston. For more than 30 years, my life has been dedicated to precision, rigor, and logic. I was a renowned heart surgeon, one of the most respected in the world. Mayo Clinic. And my name appeared in dozens of scientific publications on advances in cardiovascular surgery. The human heart was my domain. Every artery, every valve, every beat was a math problem to be resolved, a question of cause and effect, one perfect biological machine that could be fixed with knowledge and technique. But for me, it was just that, a sophisticated blood pump. There was no soul, there was no spirit. Consciousness was simply a product of brain chemistry, a side effect of electricity on the cortex. Death, just the end of the system's operation, and I was absolutely sure of that. I remember countless times when my own patients, after surviving serious heart complications, told me strange experiences. "Doctor, I saw a light. I felt an indescribable peace. I was floating on my body." I always listened to these reports with the same patience and professionalism, but inside me, I despised every word. Residual neural activity, cerebral hypoxia, neurotransmitter unloading. Those were my answers. I didn't believe in God. He didn't believe in life after death. I never needed to believe. For me, everything that existed, it was what could be measured, touched, and explained by science. But the irony of life is that it doesn't care about our certainties. At the height of my career, about to receive an honor for my work advancing cardiology, my own heart, the one I had studied so much in others, decided to stop. The doctor who always controlled life and death would be forced to face the unknown. That day, my world collapsed. The medical conference in Phoenix, Arizona, was on its second day. The event brought together the world's leading cardiovascular surgery specialists, and I was one of the main speakers. The convention hall was packed. About 500 doctors and researchers filled the chairs arranged in impeccable rows. The stage was lit by cold white spotlights, and the screen behind me displayed my name and extensive resume. Advances in minimally invasive surgery have made it possible to reduce recovery time from weeks to a few days. I was in the middle of the presentation when I felt a strange stitch in the chest. I ignored it. I continued talking. I continued demonstrating clinical cases and statistics, but as the seconds passed, the discomfort increased. One crushing pressure. It formed in the center of my sternum, radiating down my left arm and jaw. My rational brain immediately recognized the signs. Acute myocardial infarction. The thought came as an automatic, cold, clinical diagnosis. I knew exactly what was happening to me. My breathing became heavy. Sweat started to run down my forehead. The vision darkened momentarily. "Dr. Langston?" someone in the audience asked, noticing my hesitation. That's when I lost my balance. The tablet I was holding slipped from my fingers and fell to the floor with a thud. I tried to hold on to the podium to avoid falling, but my body no longer responded. I fell of coasts on stage. The sound of conversations in the audience turned into a distant hum. I saw the faces of doctors hurriedly getting up, running towards me. "Langston, he's having a heart attack. Call an emergency team. Now." My consciousness wavered. My chest burned with an internal fire, as if something was tearing my heart apart from the inside. Dr. James Chen, my colleague and friend for years, kneeling beside me. His voice seemed to come from far away. "Everett, hang in there," I heard someone shout. "Cardiac arrest confirmed." My vision went completely black. Then, absolute silence took over everything. I was clinically dead, 17 minutes and 2 seconds. That was the time my heart didn't hit. During this period, my body became inanimate. No pulse, no blood pressure, no detectable brain activity. The doctors tried 7 electric shocks to revive me, 7 attempts to bring a man back from the dead, but I was no longer there. What I experienced can't be explained by the science I knew. I was elsewhere, and my journey was just beginning. The first sign that something unusual was happening was feeling of lightness. The pain that consumed my chest just disappeared. My first reaction was to rationalize. Could this be the relief that precedes death? A last lapse of consciousness before the end. But then, I saw the scene below me. My body was on the floor, inert, surrounded by doctors shouting orders. I could see every detail of the scene with absurd clarity, much sharper than any human perception should be. What was even stranger, I wasn't inside my body. I was above, floating at a height of 2 or 3 meters, as if it were an invisible camera. Whatever I was at that moment was no longer tied to the flesh. Below, Dr. James Chen was giving frantic chest compressions. His face was pale, and beads of sweat glistened under the cold auditorium lights. "Come on, Everett. Don't die now," he shouted. I saw every movement, every expression, but the most shocking it was that I listened too. I could listen to the heartbeat of each person in the room, the sound of shoes sliding on the floor, the metallic click of the defibrillator being primed, charging to 300 joules. Get away. One electric shock ran through my inert body. Nothing. Another shock. Nothing. A third. Straight line. I felt like I should panic. I was dead. But paradoxically, there was no fear, just a deep curiosity and a growing sense of peace. And then, something changed. The room around me started to lose clarity, like fogged glass. Everything became opaque and distorted. The sounds became quieter, as if they were moving away. And suddenly, the light appeared. He was unlike anything I ever imagined. The light, it wasn't just light. She was alive. She pulsated, as if it had its own breath. And, most intriguingly, she recognized me. I felt an intense heat, but not fire. It was something deeper, something that penetrated to the core of my existence. The fear I should feel, it didn't exist. There was no despair, no anguish, just one feeling of absolute welcome. The light involved me like a hug. I was pulled into it. The world behind me completely disappeared. There was no more auditorium, no more doctors trying to revive me, no more Everett Langston, the surgeon. There were only me and the living light. And then, a voice came from all sides at once. She didn't echo. It did not vibrate in the air like human voices. It simply existed, filling everything. Everett, my name. But it was not a simple identification. When the voice spoke Everett, it was as if she spoke directly to my soul, as if it contained all the knowledge about who I was, all the memories, all the secrets, every beat of my heart since the day I was born. And then, I saw him. Someone was in front of me, emerging from the light, a silhouette that became increasingly clear. My eyes widened, because even before I see it clearly, I already knew exactly who it was. He was there, but not as I expected. Jesus. Not the pale, blue-eyed man that Renaissance paintings depict. Not a ghost. Not a fuzzy, ethereal vision. He was real, more solid than anything I've ever seen in my life. His hair was golden brown, long to the shoulders, but they did not shine like artificial light. They seemed to absorb and reflect the very essence of the living light around them. But what hit me the most were your eyes. They changed color, sometimes warm amber, sometimes deep blue like the ocean, had an entire universe within them. They were the eyes of someone who knew everything about me, every mistake, every act of pride, every time I was indifferent to someone's pain. Each time I looked down on those who believed in something other than science. You knew, and yet, there was no judgment in his gaze. Had love. When he spoke, I didn't hear it with my ears. Your voice, it wasn't a sound. It was something deeper. It was like if every cell of my being absorbed your words. Everett, you have always sought truth through science. Now you will see even greater truths. If I still had a physical body, I would have fallen to my knees that instant. My decades-old pride, my academic arrogance, my certainty that the universe was just matter, everything was pulverized with a single sentence. I wanted to ask. I wanted to understand. I wanted to respond, but I couldn't speak. Because for the first time in my life, I knew I was facing something infinitely greater than any scientific explanation could contain. Jesus raised his hand, and when he touched my forehead, everything exploded. Not as an explosion of destruction, But as an ocean of knowledge overflowing over me, suddenly I saw everything, the creation of the universe. The laws of physics bend under a much larger plane than we imagine, the interconnection between science and spirituality. What we believe are scientific discoveries, they were nothing more than a pale reflection of a greater truth. And, amidst this torrent of knowledge, Jesus showed me something I could never imagine. I was transported to another time, another space. Suddenly, I was there, in the past, in the middle of an angry crowd, dust and blood in the air. The sound of raised voices echoed everywhere, and in front of me, I saw something that broke my soul into 1,000 pieces. I was before a cross, and who was in it? It was him, not an ordinary man, not a martyr of history. I was inside the very body of Christ at the crucifixion, and I felt everything. The moment I realized where was I, it was like a blow to the soul. I wasn't just attending the crucifixion of Jesus. I was inside it. I felt everything. The pain was indescribable. Nails they had pierced my wrists, crossing the median nerves with surgical precision. The shock of pain radiated all over the arm, an unbearable fire. Every time I breathed, I felt like my lungs filled with glass, because the body was hanging by the arms, forcing me to stand up about the blackheads on the feet to obtain a minimum of oxygen. But that wasn't the worst part. The weight. The weight was greater than any physical pain. Hugh felt every sin, every guilt, every suffering of humanity. It was as if every mistake, every tear, every despair of every human being had been dumped on me, and in the middle of it, I felt your love. Why? Despite all this pain, Jesus, I wasn't angry. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to forgive. You knew that if he had said a single word, angels would come down to end it all. But he didn't ask for it. He accepted. He chose suffer so that we didn't have to carry this weight alone. And then, I heard his voice, like a whisper inside me. Now you understand. To dinner it disappeared. And me, I fell in the void. I was thrown away. And suddenly I saw everything. I saw the universe being born. What we call Big Bang. It wasn't just a cosmic explosion. Was a decision. Every second, I understood things that seemed impossible before. Mathematics, biology, physics. Everything was a reflection of an infinitely superior mind. The human DNA. It wasn't an evolutionary fluke. Every detail was intentional. Every heartbeat I had operated on throughout my life. Every surgery I saved. Every person I tried to heal. All of this I was already connected to a much larger plan. What we call science was never the opposite of God. Science was the language with which he organized creation. And for the first time, I realized how blind I had been. After that, I saw something that I never imagined it would be allowed to see. I was taken to specific moments in the life of Jesus. I saw the 12-year-old boy talking to Maria about her growing awareness of her mission. A moment never recorded in the Bible, when Jesus spent 3 full days with an ordinary family, teaching them about love and forgiveness, before curing a child with leukemia. The night before the crucifixion, no Mount of Olives. Jesus, I was alone. I felt what he felt. The loneliness, the fear, the weight of knowing that, within a few hours, I would feel the worst pain anyone has ever felt. But he accepted. And then I saw his gaze lift to the starry sky and heard his last words that night. Thy will be done, Father. And in the next second, I was before him again. The light around us vibrated like if the entire universe breathed with him. Jesus looked at me, and I cried. I couldn't help it. All my arrogance, all my pride, everything shattered before the absolute truth. He knew me completely, and yet, he me love. I didn't ask. I didn't need to ask. As soon as Jesus looked at me again, I knew there was more to see. The light around us began to dissipate, as if it was being drained, and suddenly, I was falling. The warmth of Jesus and presence disappeared. The peace that filled every fiber of my being was ripped away from me in an instant, and I understood. This was hell. There was no fire. There were no demons with tridents. There was just absence of God. And that, in itself, was the worst torment imaginable. I could see souls trapped in this darkness. They did not scream in physical pain, but of despair, as if they realized something too late. Nobody was there because God punished them. They were there because rejected God all their lives. And in the end, he respected that choice. The hell, it was not an imposed punishment. Era, a state of absolute separation, a place where love couldn't be felt, because the souls themselves, they turned away from him completely. And then Jesus said, "Hell is not an imposed punishment. It is a state we choose." Those words hit me like lightning. You always I rejected God. You always I belittled the faith of others. You always I put science above all. If I had died before this experience, that's where I would stay. Because I didn't want God. And if someone don't want God, he does not force anyone to be with him. It was at that moment that I completely understood what was happening to me. I wasn't just watching all this out of curiosity. I was being warned. Suddenly, the darkness faded, the pain disappeared, and then I saw the sky, but not like a city of gold and clouds. It was something bigger. Era, the home we always came from, but that we forgot when we were born. Era, absolute peace. Every molecule seemed alive, vibrating with a love so intense that I cried again. There was no time. There was no pain. There were only belonging. I saw beings of light, who were not angels as we imagine, but consciousnesses infinitely pure and radiant. They knew who I was. I felt more myself than I had ever felt on earth, and in the center of this place, there was God. There was no form. There was no physical figure, but he was there. And when his presence filled everything around me, I fell to my knees, because, at that moment, I knew I was never truly alone. Every moment of pain in my life, every doubt, every unanswered question, he was always there, and he loved me in a way I would never be able to fully understand. He felt my every tear. He knew my every thought, and yet, he loved me without restrictions. It was then that I realized how small I was before the infinity of the Creator, and at the same time, I realized that each of us is immensely precious to him. To life, it's not a coincidence. The universe, it's not a coincidence. Everything is part of a much bigger plan, and for the first time, I wanted to stay. But then, Jesus appeared again. He looked at me with that look that seemed to pierce my soul, and he said something that made me shudder. "You must go back." The words of Jesus echoed inside me like silent thunder. You must go back. I wanted to contest. I wanted to argue. I wanted to stay there forever. I looked at him, and for the first time since I started this journey, I was afraid to return. "Please," my voice was broken, "don't send me back." Because now I knew what awaited me on earth, to miss the weight of existence, the burden of knowing all this and yet having to live in the world before. But Jesus didn't argue. He smiled. It was a smile of infinite compassion, a smile that said, "I understand." And then, he approached me, placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "Tell them I am more real than their doubt, more present than their fear, and more loving than their shame." My hands trembled. I knew I couldn't question him, and before I could even try to understand, I was sucked back. The light disappeared, heaven dissolved, and I went thrown into my body, returned to the body pain. The first thing I felt was overwhelming pain. It was as if every cell in my body was on fire. My chest felt like a rock crushing my lungs. Then I heard voices. "He's back." My God. My eyes opened suddenly. The ceiling of the auditorium was above me. White lights flashed in my field of vision. I was lying on the floor, had doctors around me, and my friend, Dr. James Chen, was crying. He pressed my hand as if trying to convince himself that I was really alive. "Everett, you are here," he gasped. 7 shocks. "You were dead for 17 minutes." I heard, but he couldn't answer, because inside me, something had changed forever. And when I tried to say something, only one sentence escaped my lips. I saw Jesus. The hall was in absolute silence, and for the first time I realized the weight of my mission. I had to tell the world. The days following my return were a whirlwind of emotions and changes that challenged everything I thought I knew about myself and life. I was no longer the same man who had walked into that medical conference. Something inside me had been rewritten, transformed, purified, and the strangest thing, my body had also changed. The medical tests showed something that no one could explain. "Everett, your heart is perfect." Dr. James Chen held the exam papers, analyzing the graphs from my EKG and MRI. "But that's impossible. Just a few hours earlier, my heart had suffered a massive heart attack. Damages should be irreversible. Heart muscle cells do not regenerate easily, at least not in the science we knew. And yet, there was no damage, no scars, no dysfunction. My heart, he was beating better than before the heart attack. The doctors didn't know what to say, but I knew I had been healed in a way that medicine could not explain. I left the hospital a few days later, but it wasn't what I thought it would be. The world seemed different. The colors were more vibrant. People seemed more alive. And at the same time, everything seemed distant, almost as if I were a foreigner on my own planet. I passed the first week locked at home, trying to process what I had experienced. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, the face of Jesus came back to my mind. The touch of your hand, the absolute truth in your eyes, the mission he had given me. Tell them I am more real than their doubt, more present than their fear, and more loving than their shame. I couldn't ignore that, but how would I tell the world? As a skeptical surgeon who has always denied God, could now tell his fellow doctors and scientists that had seen Jesus. I knew I would be ridiculed, that they would call me crazy, that my reputation would crumble, but none of that mattered anymore. It was then that I made a decision. If I wanted the world to take my story seriously, I would need proof. I would return to my work as a scientist, but this time, not to study just the human heart. I would study the soul, near-death experiences, the connection between consciousness and matter, proof that death, it's not the end. This is how the Langston Institute for Consciousness Research, a dedicated center to study NDEs in a scientific way, using advanced neuroimaging and quantum physics. My goal: demonstrate to the world that science never contradicted God. She was always part of him. Time passed, but the experience I lived never left me, and it never will. I returned to the world of the living with a mission, but most of all, I came back with a certainty that not even death can shake. I saw Jesus. I saw heaven. I saw hell. And I know without a shadow of a doubt that we are much more than our physical bodies. My life, previously centered on science as the only absolute truth, now found a new purpose: unite science and spirituality, and show the world that they are not opposites, but complementary. I spent decades believing that religion was a fantasy, and that death was the end. Now I know that I was wrong. The science is the tool we use to understand creation, but its limitation is that it can only measure what is inside the physical world. What I saw is beyond matter. Scientists talk about hidden dimensions in quantum physics. Theologians talk about invisible spiritual realities. What if they are the same thing? I know that, for many, what I say seems absurd, but I invite any skeptic to analyze the thousands of NDE reports with the same objectivity with which we analyze an MRI. Patterns repeat. People who have never met each other report the same living light, the same absolute peace, the same divine presence. This is no coincidence. And what fascinates me most, the description of Jesus is always the same. It doesn't look like Western paintings. Your hair is golden brown. Your skin has the warm glow of honey in the sun. Your eyes, they change between amber and deep blue, as if reflecting the universe itself. Even in non-Christian cultures, even in people who have never read a Bible, it appears the same way. That, for me, it's powerful evidence. Jesus is real, and he does not belong to a religion. He belongs to existence itself. Many still ask me, "Are you still a scientist?" The answer is more than ever. But now, I understand that science doesn't have all the answers, and that the greatest response of all cannot be measured in numbers, but can be felt in the human heart. If you are reading this now, and you feel inside you that there is something bigger, don't ignore that voice. I ignored it my entire life, until lice, and I came back to say, he is real. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.